I played a lot as a kid. Grew up on a golf course. Now I live on one, but I actually haven't been out to play this one because there was a period in the middle where my back did not like me playing golf.
Perhaps living on a golf course would be the best part of the whole thing.
Richard, to panel, please be aware we are
live. Okay.
And Bill, do you practice by, driving all the golf balls that land in your yard back onto the green?
No, we collect them. And as a kid, I used to make money by doing that. I lived out of the dog leg the 17th years on a country club, and people were always mildly slicing into our yard.
Do you have a sign in your window that says, "Get off my lawn, you kids"?
No, we're up a big ice plant covered hill from the fairway. The fairway's lower below us. But I tell you, the wildlife is astonishing. They do love fairways with lakes and things like that. And egrets.
Rats love, ice plants.
Well, I think probably the avian population keeps them at bay because, man, we do get a lot of rabbits. But other than that, I haven't seen the rats. I'm not saying they're not there. They're everywhere.
Palm rats. They're the big ones.
Yeah, we had them and we had those in Arizona. I don't see them out here as much.
Nutria, yeah, right. It's really large rats.
No.
You look up in the tree and all you see is a pair of eyes staring back down at you. It's like, what?
Those things are, I know they're not vicious or anything, but they're scary looking. It's like a beaver showed up.
I got a new fat stick PC, and look at how big it is compared to the old one.
It's a USB port killer.
Thanks.
And Liberty, I won't put you on the spot today, but we don't need to have me do the announcement anymore because of the live stream, but I'll do it one more time. And then next week, though, you can take it over.
I had my notes here. I was ready. I'm not going to do it today, but no.
I'm happy to hand it to you.
But
You want to do it? Oh, no. Okay.
So you're saying when you're not going to do like each day anymore? You're not doing that? Or okay.
What I mean is that when this gets to 0, now before I had to launch it, I had to launch the stream. And so it really had to be me doing the announcement. But now the stream is being done by other people, and that countdown clock tells you when to start. So you'll see this countdown clock go to 0. There'll be a sweeper, and then I'll start talking. But you can do that too. Like it was the handoff that we couldn't figure out with the old version that we now have sorted with the new version.
Okay.
A lot of people ask why the countdown clock's so moody. It's because you can't leave the pixels the same. for HDR, you have to rest the pixels, otherwise you'll burn in. But it's a little darker also because of the SDR is it looks much brighter in HDR than it does in SDR.
I'm literally brighter in HDR.
All right, stand by. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is something we'd like to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to be talking about using social media for live streams and events, and how do we, a lot of people just go, well, we'll just stream to all the accounts, but really there's a lot more to it, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little later today. On Tuesday, we're going to have ruthless reviews. We haven't done it for a little while. And now that 2.0 is out, we're going to take a look at everybody's cameras and backgrounds and everything else and see how they look inside of the context that we're now fully live to Office Hours 2.0. Wednesday, we're going to talk about Office Hours 2.0 graphics. So we got it started, and it looks pretty good, but we're going to pick at it like we have with other things, and we'll talk about what we think we can improve and how we think we can make it better. On Thursday, we're going to talk about online concerts. How do artists connect with their audience online? So we're going to talk a little bit about what people are doing and things to think about related to that. And then finally, on Friday, we'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of Office Hours 2.0. This is a very Office Hours 2.0 week because we're getting it kind of geared up, and so we'll probably take a break from talking about it for a month after this. But we'll be talking about the mechanics and what's changing and what we're doing there. And then finally on Saturday, of course, is education. We are going to have we're going to be talking about general education from 8 to 10. We don't put that on YouTube. And then at 10 o'clock, we are starting our Tally Light project. So it should be pretty exciting. We're going to be building our own. Some of us have got kits, and we're going to be building them all together, kind of like the Raspberry Pi project. So stay tuned for that. And then finally, Sunday, we have our general philosophical discussion. I did leave in the email that went out today the instructions of how to export your own MetaHuman for Nick. There's some instructions there. So if you're interested in having a MetaHuman in the Office Hours Space project, there's some instructions on how to get that to Nick. All right, now I'm going to hand it off to the host, Liberty White. Take it away, Liberty.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you are watching on YouTube, you want to go over to officehours.global. That's where you can join our conversation in Mukana. That's the panel that we use, and ask your questions. And you know what? Go ahead right now and add some of your questions if you are in Mukana, because that's where the show is driven by the producers, which is you. And on that note, let's get this party started. Okay, Bill.
Thank you, Liberty. The first question today comes from Matteo in Nancy, France. And the question is, what are the best practices to keep a decent audio video quality with a limited internet bandwidth?
Jason.
I would say first and foremost, eliminate all of your background processes. It is staggering how many things, even on a Mac, are just kind of running and asking for whatever they want, whenever they want. If you eliminate those, I'd say that's going to be your best single step to fix it.
Jeffrey?
And that includes if you've got a browser open, closing out the browser, closing out all the tabs. I used to have a guy. He was the producer, and he'd always have his computer with like 100 tabs. And this is back when we were running Intel Core i5s as they just came out. The other thing is make sure that you're on an Ethernet landline right into the router. That can help over any type of Wi-Fi. And then, of course, rebooting the computer is always a good thing. If you have no control over the computer, over what the people are doing, just kind of walk them through and check out and find out what kind of computers they're using and see if they actually can live up to the task. And if you have to turn off the video for a better audio, if that's going to be your ultimate goal, you can definitely do that as well.
Alex?
Yeah, the Ethernet is definitely important. Wi-Fi will be, the problems that already exist with Wi-Fi will be exemplified or exponentially worse with low bandwidth. So you want to kind of take that into account. Also think about all the devices that might be connected to that network. What you want is the WAN to come to a device that you control and nobody else on it. If you're in low bandwidth, mode, so you have to make sure that you're really not. You have to be very stingy and selfish about your bandwidth to make sure that you're getting everything out of it. The other thing to think about is quality of the pixels. So it's tempting to say we're going to stream at 1080p, but you may need to reduce the resolution of your stream so that you have more bits per, basically we consider the minimum number of bits per pixel about 3x. So if you have a 2 megabit stream, like in a 1080p stream, we want to see 6 megs a second. If we start going below that, we may go down to about 2x. But anything below 2x, we're going to switch to a lower resolution and give you something at 720 or even lower. So as you go into those lower bandwidths, don't try to keep on pushing 1080p out, because you may get more. You may have those pixels at the end, but there's going to be a lower quality pixel that's getting to the viewer.
It's helpful. Jesse?
Another tip would be to ensure that your computer, if possible, is connected right to your modem directly rather than through other devices and hubs and things like that. That's usually helpful. And as Alex said, to turn off other devices. And then maybe when you're doing your testing, do that at the same time of day, with all the other factors that are involved with your local network working at that time.
Yeah, that last part is really helpful. We've had times where it's like, oh, it's at night and you didn't test, and it's just different. And then in the daytime. Jeffrey.
One last thing is, if you have a problematic audio video from one of your calls, have them turn off the video and then have them put up a photo of themselves and as they're speaking, because then there'll at least still be a visual from there. It's not always recommended, but if you have to do it, that's a great way to kind of skirt the video.
And Courtney.
And check in your driver or your whatever software you're using for your communications. See if there's a use hardware for video encoding, and that's usually a checkbox in there that will use your GPU to encode the H.264 stream that's going out, and it will save your CPU a lot of pain.
Next question.
David Paskett in Miami, Florida, in the U.S. says, what would you say are the minimum specs for a Mac-based Zoom ISO machine, and what's the maximum number of ISOs you can get out of one machine reliably?
Jason?
I would say the bare minimum Mac Mini will do just fine. And I don't want to get into my record, but let's just say the Duo 2 can very easily give you 4 outs without any problem whatsoever.
Mitchell.
M1 Mac Mini, 4 streams.
Alex?
Yeah, M1 Mac Mini 8 gig. We don't need the 16 gigs for that. It's not using the memory for that. And 4 streams is what you'll get out of it with the Duo. And it's running at about 20% capacity, but it's just a limitation of Zoom. Zoom won't put any more out than that before it starts dropping resolution. So we think that could get improved. I mean, you could easily get 8 out of there if Zoom allowed it to happen. Next question. I'm sorry.
Next question.
It comes from Aaron Giancarli in Flagstaff, Arizona. He says, watched a state high school championship online, which the streaming service clearly did not anticipate the viewership load. Everyone watching was constantly kicked off the stream. What should they have had in place to prevent this from happening?
Yikes. Jason.
All right. There are a lot of people answering, so I'm going to start with the most obvious and just pass it on. You need a CDN, a content delivery network, something that gives you one up and then will seed down the stream to everybody else.
Alex?
Yeah, it's hard to do this these days, because if you go to almost any basic CDN, they must have been rolling their own CDN of somehow. Maybe they thought they'd save money by putting it on their own server or trying to build this themselves. But generally, almost any CDN out there will be able to handle a fair amount of load without having any kind of crippling effect. So if you're falling off, it means they probably rolled their own server. Someone thought that they could build their own. That's not possible anymore. Like, just so you know, like, you can't do that anymore because you don't have the peering licenses, all the peering agreements that are required to really make this work. So that day is over. You need to go to a CDN that's already established. So whether it's AWS or Akamai or Vimeo, those are some of the ones that you can use if you're trying to do something behind a paywall, which I assume they are, because if they're not, going to Facebook or YouTube will never fold. The other thing that may drop people off may not have been the CDN. It could have been the web page as well. So sometimes when people are getting kicked off, it's not because the CDN can't deliver the video. It's because the web page can't handle the load of the folks that are there. And so the way to avoid that, of course, is to, once again, put your website on a cloud. Do not put your website on a server. That's potentially disastrous.
John?
One thing to take into consideration is transactions per second and how security appliances can actually interpret that. So this year, last year now, my company went public. There was a video of us down at the New York Stock Exchange. Well, everyone in our company could access it at the same time. That caused Vimeo's security to trigger off, and then caused us not to be able to log in. So they thought it was a security threat, not 8,000 people trying to watch our video go live at the same time. So it's just a very interesting thing. But like Alex said as well, it can be the person hosting it. It could be whatever security mechanism in place. There's a lot of things that can go wrong that don't relate to video delivery.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, there could be an infrastructure issue too. I mean, you're in a football field, which is usually far away from any real building, and of course you might even be fighting your internet access with thousands or hundreds of other people that are watching the game, trying to connect up to go from there. So having a secondary Wi-Fi, or not Wi-Fi, but a secondary connection into the stream probably will help a little bit.
Alex.
Yeah, I'm not sure if anything at the location would make that much of a difference, because you're delivering theoretically to a CDN. So it's just what's dropping things off is most likely the connection to that CDN. If you're going directly, that would be crazy. The one of the things that you want to think about though is your web page. The final web page that the users hit should be as simple as possible, because this gets back into what John was talking about. If you have it's not just the number of people, but if you have a bunch of complex interactions, you'll want to put a bunch of cool things in there, like ads or little things that pop up, or all kinds of things that are interactive. That creates an enormous load when a lot of people hit it. And so you have to be very careful. Huge live streams have gone down because somebody built a complex page, and then suddenly got hit by millions of people. And that can definitely cause a problem.
Because it's calling all of those items in addition to calling the stream.
So a lot of times you'll notice that on the page that you actually watch, that page gets real simple. Like now ours doesn't, because we don't have that many people watching. Yeah, on office hours, but we don't have millions. We can get you can get away with tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands. But when you get into really big numbers, if it has to call a ton of things, one of the things about like Mukana is it exists mostly on the page, so there's very little data coming to it. It's not calling a lot of things, in the way that it would. We had to learn how to do that over time.
Next question.
David Paskin in Miami, Florida is right back with using lots of different solutions for live streaming interviews, and he's finding Zoom to be the most stable. Is this because of their financial investment, or is there some special sauce that you know of?
Mitchell.
Well, as Carl Sagan used to say, billions and billions just ticking and purring away in their bank account. And of course, the special sauce costs billions and billions. So they can throw a lot of resources at stuff, and now they got a few of our former panelists doing it too.
David?
Well, in my opinion, I think it's their lineage coming from the Tandberg Cisco environment, where a lot of their engineering was born. So there's a deep history of video conferencing technologies there.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, they came right from Cisco saying we want to do something better, and that's the one thing they're focused on, as opposed to Microsoft, which is focused on several different aspects. So when you really dig down and focus on something, you can really do it right.
Alex?
Fundamentally, most of their competition is either older technology that was older than Zoom. It wasn't really rewritten there. So if you look at GoToMeeting or WebEx or all those ones, that's very old infrastructure, which they were able to rewrite from the ground up based on experience with some of them. So that helps them have a more modern architecture. They're able to traverse complex data networks much more effectively through the apps. So the other one that might normally be really, really good is a lot of the Google Meet stuff because of Google, but depending on the website, depending on a web browser is not a stable way to do that. So they're kind of crippled that way. The only other company that really has the ability to do some of these things is Microsoft, and they've kind of hobbled their video transport service, and so to 724 megs, and so that's why you're generally going to get the highest quality at scale. And again, there's some more vertical ones like Stream Voodoo, which we're going to play with a lot. That is very specific to something that has very high quality, but it's not designed to scale the way that Zoom is.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, I'm currently in a motel with poorly secured Wi-Fi, WPA, and I'm using a VPN, but what other means should I use to keep my information secure?
John?
You can, a physical firewall in between yourself would be good. Software firewall will get by. I would also just double check and see if you can do a network scan, see if they're doing isolated guest networks, meaning that your network, your device can't talk to anything else on the network. Those are a couple things that I would start with.
Courtney?
One possible solution is, if you have a phone with unlimited data, is use LTE, because it'll be more secure. And you can also set it up as a hotspot, but make sure if you do set it up as a hotspot, don't publish the SSID so other people would see it around you in your hotel rooms around you. And of course, use a long password and WPA2 to secure it as a hotspot and connect it to your laptop.
Next question.
Hasmuk in South Africa says, Alex mentioned Omniscope a few times. My biggest challenge is optimizing my Blackmagic 6K as a webcam. Should I invest in this? And he notes, my eye for color is not my strength.
Nigel?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to admit that I know less about this subject than practically anyone on the panel. But I do play with this thing every morning. Even if you have the free version, it lasts for about 10 minutes. I'll show you briefly, if it doesn't blow everybody up, what that looks like for me. It's just coming across badly now because it was showing me. But that's what I do in the morning. And when I get into Blackmagic, the first thing I do is use the universal control. Then I crush the blacks. Then I work on the gain, the gamma and the gain. Then I try and use the contrast. And then the following that, the saturation. And it doesn't work well this way, but I get the waveform to cover most of the ground, peaking. And then Alex commented on my camera the other day, and I did a screenshot of that, and I try and get as close as I can to that. But I'm a newbie here, and I get 10 minutes to play with it, and then it dies on me.
I like the discipline. Every morning?
Yeah, I try and do it every morning. Again, a piece of advice from Alex was start fresh every morning. But I would really like a target to aim for. So that's why I took a screenshot of the waveform to see if I could sort of keep myself close to where I was going.
John?
I do the same thing. I haven't had much experience with it, so I did a bunch of YouTube videos watching, trying to understand what exactly I'm doing, looking at what like a different television studios were doing online and kind of showcasing how they color grade. I first started off playing out with LUTs and then kind of moved away from that and just trying to build my own. And I think it's working okay, and I'm definitely learning, but I love an after hours stepping in or maybe a second hour on how to do it well.
Noted. David?
As you know, I purchased a copy when I saw it here, and I have it in my Zoom room. I throw it into after hours from time to time. Let me know when you need it. It'll be there, and then get Charles Klein because he can do it he can help you from his phone in a parking lot, as he did with I forget the gentleman's name.
Why am I not surprised?
Alex?
Yeah, and I think that scopes are absolutely necessary. I mean, I think that you to really understand what you're looking at, and I like to have them opened a lot, both audio and video scopes, just because what happens is your brain starts to connect what that color and what that look means on the scopes, and at that point, you're able to start to quantify what's actually is making a difference in what you're doing over time.
Bill?
And I say, if you can afford the little peripheral of an Atem Mini to connect to your 6K, it will allow you to not only touch up color, but save them into presets that you can reload. Every day when I come in here, the first thing I do is reload my preset, and it puts me back to a decent picture. As we're moving toward HDR, I'm going to be futzing with that more, but it's nice to know that once I establish something that looks good, I can at least get back to it every day with a click.
Next question.
Next question comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. Are there any rules surrounding the use of auto-tracking pan-tilt zoom cameras in union contract venues?
Courtney?
Well, maybe. It depends on how prickly the local business agent is at whatever venue you're at. They can always say, these are the rules, you have to abide by our rules, whether it's in the union contract or not. Generally, with robotic cameras, I think there are rules that say that if it's a union contract, you have to have a union camera operator operating the controls over multiple. They cannot be one operator that operates multiple remote robotic heads, which is PTZ would come under. So you might check that. But if you're worried about it, you could check with the union rules, but they'll probably say, oh, we need an operator for each one. But hopefully not.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, this is going to depend on location and size of what your production. Like, for instance, if as a blogger, I kind of get away, or podcaster, I kind of get away with it in like Las Vegas. But when we went to Moscone Center, we had to have a union person on almost everything. So the first call that I would make is to the union rep. and see what can be done, what can't be done, and then go from there. And then the second thing is if you start putting infrastructure around, like for instance, stands and things like that, where cameras are going to be overhead, most likely you're going to need union people not only to control them, but also to help you set them up.
Alex?
I think it definitely it depends on the location. We've definitely used lots of PTZs and even auto tracking PTZs in Moscone and in New York and in Javits and other ones. No one's ever said anything about it just because there's a lot of union folks already working, and we're hiring them for the rest of the crew. We're not trying to cut corners on it. We just happen to have cameras that are in places that don't make sense to put a camera operator, like the ceiling. So a lot of our PTZs have not been so much in that area, but we have used them there. It's obviously a union operator operating those cameras, but we definitely haven't seen rules that say it has to be a union operator per camera. It's mostly just been there has to be a union operator operating the cameras that we hand them.
Next question.
David Paskin at Miami, Florida is back once again with, I'm finding audio routing to be far more complicated than video. Is it just me? Why is that? And any guidance for learning how to understand it better?
Courtney. You're on mute. And you're still on mute, Courtney. Okay, we'll go to Jesse and come back.
How ironic. Yeah. Maybe it's partially complicated because there's generally more sources and more destinations for audio. And also there's more additive and subtractive possibilities that happen with audio. One thing I can mention as far as looking back to the fundamentals of audio is to check out the Yamaha Live Sound Reinforcement Handbook, which is quite old at this point, but it really has a nice framework that you can take those fundamentals and theories and things like that and apply them to any piece of hardware or software. And then if you're looking at specific software and hardware routing that you want to get into, you have to follow the manufacturer's pathway. But nowadays with Dante, you can do their Dante certifications for free if you're looking at digital audio routing.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things to do if you have a specific device is to bring it into after hours and say, I'm trying to figure out how to do this thing. And people will sit there and show you how to route it and reroute it. It's absolutely more complicated. If I'm looking for, I have far more people that I'd say, oh, if they know audio, I can teach them video. I do not say if they know video, I can teach them audio. And part of the reason for that is that A, you have to visualize something you can't see. And B, it's because you're mixing it all. It's like if you had all 8 cameras and you were mixing part of this camera into that camera and you were like mixing all those cameras together, video would be really complicated too because they're all live all at the same time, and audio is all live all at the same time going through all these routes. And so it's just a much more complicated thing by itself, and then you can't see it. So it definitely requires someone who can visualize what's happening in a complex system without actually seeing a lot of the data there.
Mitchell?
What Alex just said, and as an audio guy, I appreciate what he's saying because he's realizing that there's so much complexity to it all. One thing that's made it easier, and to your favor, David, is that with digital, things can be linked together where it makes sense to have them linked. And sync is a big issue with audio and video when you're kind of both coexisting. Sync is getting a lot better because a lot of times it's either embedded in the video and you can switch the audio along with the video router, or in some cases, a separate network like Dante or whatever has the ability to take a whole surround, which includes 5, 6, 7 microphones, and bring them together.
Next question.
Michael Forrest across the pond in London in the UK says, I've used a LUT to make my camera feed look more color graded, but finding one I like involves a lot of trial and error. Is there any advice about choosing a good LUT?
John?
Gone down this path quite a few times now, and I just ended up buying a color chart, and I'm trying to play with that just to build my own versus constantly buying something from somebody else. A lot is going to very heavily depend on what your environment looks like, what your color of your lights are, and so you could just apply one. It may look well, it may not, but I think you're going to find the best case by building your own.
Nigel?
Yeah, I wasted a lot of money trying to get LUTs. Not a lot of money, but a bit of money on LUTs that I bought. In the end, Charles helped me with mine, but I've also been practicing with, the color chart and into Resolve. Resolve is free. You very quickly build a LUT for your camera, and then you can insert it in. I think that we did a session on it in office hours, but if not, there's 100 different videos on YouTube, and every so often I go back and recheck it to see how close I am.
And also bring it into after hours. Alex?
Yeah, I think we're pretty close. We're going to do the Ruthless review this week, and then sometime next week I'm looking at doing seeing when we can get some folks in, and we'll do kind of a party. It's
a LUT party?
A
LUT party.
Yeah, so we'll have, I want to give people time to be able to order any kind of colorimetrics that they need to order and be really ready for that. But I think that it would be a good thing for us to do. But you want to build your own. The ones that you buy are garbage.
Interesting. Okay. Bill?
Well, the one exception to that is that sometime, particularly for the better cameras, you will find that the camera manufacturer has a LUT pre-built for the colorimetry of that camera. So if you have a Blackmagic 6K, you can go on the Blackmagic website and either they or some of the third parties will have LUTs specifically designed for that camera. So it is not impossible to find LUTs that work really well with the common higher end cameras. So don't discount going to the manufacturer.
Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia here on the panel. When streaming a live event, what should be the order of preference and why between A, hardware encoders, B, software encoders, and C, multi-streaming services that run off browsers?
Todd.
Hey, Danny. Should be is always a question, but I've always been a multi-platform streamer. I started out with software. I ended up in hardware, and here are my reasonings. My multi-streaming got me audience from everybody. That was cool. Alex has kind of showed me that there might be a reason to lean in against that. Software encoding is actually kind of great for traveling because you're not carrying extra gear. However, your internet is really, and your computer power is really dependent upon that. And then camera switching on hardware, there's nothing better or easier. I guess you vMix folks will say something different, but man, I rely on this hardware now, and I'm very, very happy.
David?
I would go with hardware encoders because of the modularity of it. You could throw multiple pieces at it. Services like YouTube and Facebook both have backup stream locations, so you can quickly toggle that way. Software encoding, the second choice if that device is dedicated to it. And the multi-streaming thing, I'm just getting into myself. Enjoy it for the Sunday place. Works well there. And there you go.
Jeffrey?
I've always done software encoding myself, but because that's how I had it with the stuff that I had. So, but nowadays with the fact that we've got Mac Mini M1s and the ability to actually have smaller computers, I'm really excited to go on the road with my system because it's going to have 3-4 machines. Because I'm also a big fan of modularizing things. Like for instance, the switching from that software encoder will be the only thing that's done on that computer. Well, another computer will handle the graphics, another computer will handle how the cameras get in, and then another computer will even handle how the stream is getting out to the encoder to go from there. I would not do the encoder. That would probably be the last on the list because the biggest problem is you cannot see the result until the result happens. Whereas with hardware and software, at least you have a confidence monitor you can set up so you can see how it's going to look before it sends out.
That's a good breakdown. Alex?
Yeah, the only way to get a software encoder to be stable, in my opinion, is to have the computer only doing that one thing. And once you have that computer only doing that one thing, you might as well buy a hardware encoder. Like that's my issue. Is it's going to be more stable. It's going to work well. So there's hardware encoders, everything from the Videon makes hardware encoders. Of course, AWS makes the ones that we're using for the show at the links and the Ultra and the UHD links. And there are a wide variety of other ones that you can use. But I would look at hardware encoders, over all of the other ones. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do multi-streaming because you can hardware encode to Restream or to AWS or to something else, and then split it up among all the services from there. So that's where I would go. I think that the web streaming, the things like Vidyard and so on and so forth are fine, but they really put you in a box. There's only so much you can do if you're going to use those, and I think that you're not able to really innovate.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama, Pennsylvania says, what is your preference on streaming bitrate, CBR versus VBR, constant bitrate versus variable bitrate? I notice Atem Mini uses VBR.
Jason?
I assume you're talking about video, and to my knowledge, all video streaming is variable bitrate. It's almost always that way because, of course, if you think about it, a black square is going to require far fewer numbers than, every pixel changing every frame every minute. At the end of the day, it's inherently kind of a false choice.
Mitchell?
Yeah, I'm with Jason. I wasn't aware that you could switch between the two when you're encoding. Possibly. I know when you're editing CBR versus VBR, VBR is not the one you want to work with because you can have sync errors and other issues for overhead.
Bill?
Yeah, it depends, and it depends on content for me. If I'm shooting something that I know is going to be good for variable bitrate encoding, like a speaker in front of a blank wall where you know that it can absolutely compress that wall once and then just work on the person talking, as opposed to something like you're at a golf tournament and every single shot you cut to is going to be a world of different palette colors and things like that. It's going to give you no advantage to try to apply variable bitrate to that golf scenes because literally you just have too much detail in it. So it just depends on what you're trying to get accomplished.
As a side note, he says in the chat that he notices in OBS that he sees those two options. Jeffrey?
Yeah, and most software streaming programs will have both options. I actually use it from time to time. I run a 24/7 live stream. And sometimes it's showing my 3D printer. Sometimes it's showing me live, and sometimes it's showing videos that I've done. And setting it to CBR will give you some advantages. But if you don't have the pipe to send it out, it'll also become a hindrance, and go from there. For my 24/7 channel, every now and then I'll notice the lag will start to happen if I have CBR attached, and I'll have to stop the stream and restart it from there. So that's something to keep in mind. Keep it at VBR unless you have an absolute need to see it at constant bitrate.
Alex?
I deliver things to the web and VBR. So, in fact, MacBreak I wrote a chapter in a book for someone about how aggressive I can be about VBR. Doing natural keyframes and setting my keyframes to 200, and all kinds of other things to get a lot of. And the reason we shot MacBreak the way the video we used to do is so that we could take advantage of VBR. I never stream with VBR. VBR creates an unstable situation for the ingest point. So I never, ever. But never, ever, never stream to VBR. So it's always CBR on the way out because you want to make sure that the bandwidth that you're using is stable, and it's not changing. You don't want it to surge up and down based on what's going on. You want it to be, I'm going to use this. I have this much pipe, and I'm going to use all of it, all the time, and I'm going to get the best quality I can out of that CBR. But I would never live stream with the CBR. But I deliver everything. If I'm going to deliver something to the web, it's all VBR.
Next question.
Andrew Moyer in Oakville, California notes, I've noticed that when the next question is asked, that we see the previous question displayed. Is this a 2.0 system error or an operator error?
Good question there. I'm going to wait for someone to there.
Yeah, I don't, that must be an error. So we'll take a look at it. It's probably for some reason, how we're doing it, as far as when it activates and when it's being handed to the thing. We'll take a look at that. Probably should happen when it hits go.
Well, just from my point of view as the one handling the question, I start reading as soon as Alex or Liberty or whoever the host is says next question. For me, this is essentially a radio show in that respect. I don't want dead air waiting for a graphic to cycle unless there's some compelling reason. So I'm going to start reading that even before the graphic comes up, if for any reason something delays it on the back end. Yeah. So there was one circumstance where it happened today.
Yeah, if it's happening regularly, it's a problem. We are getting to the situation where we have people handling the graphics on the back end, and they're not quite pushing it fast enough, to get it up there, or maybe it's not reacting fast enough. So we have to take a look at what's happening, because it's super important that as soon as Liberty says next question, it has to hit at that moment. And so the readers, whether it's me or Bill or Mitchell, will start reading no matter what.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is up next. He says, how do you synchronize the top 5 clouds for all your data, like files, photos, and audio recordings?
Jason?
Get something like a NAS Synology, either that or just choose one. Just choose one, Paul. Choose one and standardize it, and I think you'll be happier.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine, back again from Panama, Pennsylvania, says, been testing Keyeing Talent from green screen and might have to clean up 300 plus talent videos and photos. Is there a way to make the process more efficient and not have to clean it up in post-production? Is there a way to key out on the go?
Mitchell.
Yeah, the better job you do of setting it up before you shoot it means that on the back end, maybe just a simple bump on the plug-in will generate a great key. And I think Alex will come on next and tell you how to get that key to look so good.
Alex.
This question has come up a lot in the last week. So I'm getting better at talking about it. A lot of people are thinking about green screen. You know, the main thing is that everything is about, I'm hoping that you haven't shot it yet, because everything is about how you capture green screen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you do not want to be cleaning up green screen. You want to clean it up this is the place that fixing in post never turns out well, especially when it's in mass. Like if you have one shot here, one shot there that you can spend an hour or two on to really suss out all the issues, then you're set. Number one is shoot highest resolution. You also want to make sure that your sharpening on your camera is turned to off. You can sharpen that later, turning the sharpening on. The contrast, you know, along edges like this, the contrast there it tells the sharpening. What it does is it tries to accentuate that, which will give you little white lines going down there if you have too much there. So that's something you want to take a look at. You want to make sure that your gain is set to 0. So you're not getting, grain is not your friend in this area, or noise. And then the other thing is light your talent separate from your background. Typically, we want the talent to be 3 to 4 meters away from the background. We have the lights. We want to have soft lights going across like this. And when we look at our levels, we want it to be at the Lumiscope. You want it to be straight across. Maybe it'll dip a little bit at the end. And that's why you move those lights back and forth. And that's why a live scope like Omniscope makes a difference, because I literally have the scopes open. I'm not looking at the screen. I'm looking at the scopes. I'm just sitting there moving my lights, looking at the scopes until I even this all out. You want this line to be at about 70%. You want it to be very even going all the way across. If you're keying feet, you're in trouble. So try to just not do that, because then you only have one surface that you have to actually manage, for that process. And then once you do that, you're going to get really good keys. You probably don't have to do anything else. If you got a little bit of vignetting and so on and so forth, what you can do is pull the key here, and then you do a max. And what it'll do is it'll go out like this. It'll push this out to here. We call that a procedural garbage mat. And then you do another key and you go in, and that's what we call a procedural core mat. So now the only thing you're keying is this area in here, and it'll let you focus on the edges a lot more. So you can do that as a multi-pass, and you can set that up and just drop clips into it and move it. We used to do about 10 to 11 hours a week, of footage, and it was pretty automatic. There's very little human interaction with getting it to work.
Next question.
Eric Mueller in Germantown, New York says, is it possible to use my Streamdeck on all my network devices at the same time? Assign some buttons for different apps on different computers and different devices.
Jason.
Absolutely, you can do that. Easiest way to do it is with a Raspberry Pi. So I had to unplug it for it, but I'm constantly using this for my lights, also the Atem, also the 4 other computers that are running things in the studio. And you just need to standardize your IP addresses and make sure that the right packets are going to the right device. To me, the easiest possible way to do that is to give the Streamdeck its own device. And in my case, that's a Raspberry Pi.
David.
Yeah, the other thing to do is, depending on the software you're trying to trigger, some software has built-in stuff like MIDI for video playback, has a linked connection between the two. Others, like the clock that I use, you can do a broadcast message and change things on everything. One trick that I'll use is I'll install multiple instances of a particular module in Streamdeck, and that way they're isolated that way too. So if you have the Vicrio key listener, I have that on a few different devices, and just depending on which connection you're configuring, that's how you can stack things up that way. Works pretty good.
Next question.
Paul Walus in Austin, Texas is up next with, is the Streamdeck a good device to use to play audio and video clips?
David.
The Streamdeck is really only as good as what it's controlling. So it's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I live by it. But I use it all the time to trigger video, to trigger audio through Ecamm. I think it really depends on what you have your Streamdeck controlling.
Mitchell?
You also should get used to it. If you're triggering something like audio or video, you want it to happen as soon as you hit it, and there may be a continuity issue. And I found with Streamdeck that sometimes it just isn't there instantly. And if you hang on, I think Jeffrey will tell you the difference between pushing down and releasing the button. Jeffrey.
So with the Streamdeck, the playing audio is actually what it does have that option, because you created a soundboard for that, and in order to do that, you have to assign it some sort of audio source from there. I've done that. I have my soundboard set up, and every now and then it'll cause problems, but it's a great way to get it into something like Zoom. You will need something like OBS or Wirecast or vMix to bring that in, to bring it into Zoom.
Next question.
Chris Taylor, near me in Carlsbad, California, says, with the Atem Mini Extreme Iso, are there always out-of-sync issues with the microphone and video if your mic is not routed through the camera? And what's the best fix without having a MixPre?
Alex?
Yeah, if you go into the Extreme ISO through the analog input as opposed to some other input, you should be able to delay it. So there's a delay inside of the mixer or inside of the switcher that will allow you to delay that process there. But yeah, if you're not going through the camera directly, you may have it. You should have very little if your audio is going straight into your Atem. You should have very little to delay unless something else is happening upstream from it. But that's where you change it.
John?
I would say make sure you're keeping your frame rates all the same. You're going to introduce extra latency if you're going to have like a 60 frames and a 30 frame source both going into the Atem.
Todd?
Mickey helped me set up through Audio Hijack a way to get out from my M1 Mac Mini through the display port, through the pluggable display port. So it's going to the Blackmagic into input 8. So it's just carrying straight digitally out through the HDMI. Works just beautifully for me as an output source.
And Bill?
I'm wired in double system, which means that my audio chain is totally separately from the video chain. The video is going through an Atem Mini. The audio is not. It's going through the Apollo Solo Thunderbolt driven thing, and that is so fast that I have noticed no discrepancies in my audio and video rates whatsoever. So it sometimes depends on your hardware.
Next question.
Next one comes from Gregory Wheeler, and he says, can you go over the steps on matching cameras for a live shoot again? We're using the same cameras, but different lenses.
Alex?
The biggest thing is to get all the cameras together before you put them into place. This is something that a lot of people don't do, and it really makes it hard. If you're using, and then know what color lights you're using. Now, you should be able to set the cameras up so they match no matter what, but you need to take a look at that. So basically what we do is, let's say we're doing a 56K show. We're going to put all the cameras. We're going to put our chart, and I'll show you a chart in a second. And we have one camera. And the first camera, you want to get it to look exactly the way you want it. So you put somebody up there, you paint that camera so that it looks exactly the colors that you like. Now, I'm not talking about how to make a pristinely color accurate look. I'm saying this is how you want it to look. You want it to look a little warm or a little cool or whatever you're going to do with it. Once you get that one camera, you have that camera and you have your chart. And basically, you put you basically shoot another camera. Now, if you're doing this live, like through a switcher, and you're shading them, you want them both to basically see the chart almost at the exact same angle, and you try to get them so that the chart is looking over time. You're looking at both of those. Now you can start to compare them. And what I do is I use a chart. It looks like this. This is a Chroma Devon chart. And what I do is I do a transition that cuts through all of these colors all the way around. And wherever I see a line, I know that those cameras aren't matching. so it's a very simple visual way to do it. And you just keep on moving, you keep on shading until the line disappears all the way around. And at that point, you know that the cameras are identical. And then you bring the next camera in and do it over and over and over again. It doesn't have to be a chart like this, but it does have to be something that you can kind of do a transition like that. One thing that you could do is just put all the colors along a row and then just go halfway between, and then you'd see them. But you really want to get colors that this one, actually, these colors will show up on a vector scope. So they will actually, if you have a vector scope like this, I'm not going to too many of these buttons, but they'll actually draw a line if you're totally accurate. If you're trying to build kind of something that's specific, but this is a kind of an expensive solution. The other way to do it is to use something like Resolve. Will get you close if you have a chart that matches their auto matching, and then you could actually build LUTs for it. So those are a couple different ways to approach that problem.
Nice. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. He says, how would you set up groups of devices like light bulbs in Amazon Alexa, Google Home, Facebook Portal, or Apple Home?
Nigel.
Well, we could spend the next 15 minutes discussing the various different versions of this, so let's try and make this simple. There are two different techniques in most of these programs. One are scenes, which is exactly what it sounds like. You create a scene with the different devices. And then the other is automations, which is when you open the door, the light comes on. We would normally advise you never to have multiple of these things going at once, because they get very confused about what state they're in, and they all update their software pretty randomly, and you will once a month go through and reset them all. If you are determined to have multiple different ones, create a hierarchy of what the most senior system is and build a sort of pyramid up that way. But the more systems you put in this, the more messy it will get.
Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with Nigel about the multiple systems can be a problem. One thing I do is in Amazon, the A-Lady, Echo, I group, if you group groups of lights into a room, if you put them in, assign them to a room, and then you can just say, turn on the bedroom. It'll turn on all the lights or everything that you have that's inside that bedroom. The other way is to create a routine, which you do that in the app by clicking more, and then you'll see a list of things, and you click on routines, and you can set a trigger phrase to trigger a routine, like turn on the lights for podcasting. And whenever you say that value, you can set each individual item you want and what state you want to put it into. You can have it turn off certain things and turn on certain things, and it'll run through that routine and control all of those devices. You can set lights to a certain level. You can set them to a certain color, just by mentioning that one routine. And that's the best way to do it. You have to be careful if you group stuff into a room and you just say, turn on the bedroom light, and you don't get the word light out correctly, or it misses the word light. It'll turn on everything in the bedroom if you have it all grouped into one.
Jeffrey.
Here's what's really cool. I got to see this at CES, and this is awesome. There's a new group called the I don't know if how new they are, but it's called the Connectivity Standards Alliance. And their goal is to actually have that communication go across all the platforms. So all you have to do is do once, and that's it, to set up and go from there. I got to see I was actually writing words on a piece of wood, and if I wrote sleep, it would actually turn off all the lights, and they were on. One was on a Google Home, one was on an LA, and it was really awesome. This is going to be coming out within the next 6 months. So whatever you set up, be ready to be able to prepare that for that pairing of all of those things, because those standards are really going to start to come in. It's going to be really cool what we can do.
Next question.
Brad Simmons in Annandale, Virginia says, love the guide you are using to get people lined up. Possible to download that somewhere?
Alex.
It's in Discord right now, and maybe someone can put a link to that in, but you have to be in Discord to get it. But I think that, I don't remember where the Fenwick guide was posted.
I have no idea. I can't remember.
Maybe
I just looked up Brad's name. I didn't see him in Discord. I'll send it to you, but it should be someplace easy.
Maybe we should put a resource thing. Maybe talk to Ken about putting a resource thing where we just start adding resources that people can download. That would be good. So we'll figure out a way. But it's in Discord. And the way to get into Discord is to be here at 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We put it into Mukana. So, but that's how you get into Discord. It's difficult. We know. All right. Next.
Chad has just dropped the link, so that'll help get here at 6:40. Next question.
Next one comes to us from George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. How much risk is there in moving to a new YouTube channel from office hours? How can the existing audience be converted to the new channel?
John?
I think the biggest thing for us, I don't know how much adoption we have across YouTube. It's more about the interaction that we're having, moving people from Zoom to YouTube only. And I believe that Mukana is really where we're driving most of our interaction from. And so most people are just going to ingest it from wherever. Hopefully they like and subscribe and turn the little bell on, all the stuff you're supposed to do in YouTube, just to get notified outside of Mukana. But definitely I think Mukana is the place for us.
Jeffrey.
Technically, it's actually easy to move videos over from one channel to the other, especially if you're going from a regular channel to a branded channel. YouTube has the steps in doing that. We're probably not going to do that. I've talked with Alex about it. He'll talk more about it in a second. But the other thing is we have a very stable area in officehours.global, and if anything changes, the web page will change. You won't see the difference. And if you're in Mukana, if you're on Discord, you'll know where to go as well.
Alex?
Yeah, I know that I work against like all the rules of all the social media, but I don't really care about the number of followers, just the number of people who are getting what they need out of it. So the thing is that people will find it, if they need it. There's a note in my account that where this was going before that says, "Hey, this is where office hours went." so I put it in there, and I'll probably do a video. I'm letting us settle. So just so you know, I'm letting us settle in this new one. Like, for instance, we have some sync issues that were just pointed out. So letting us figure a bunch of those things out before we start promoting it. So the next things that will happen is I'll put a video up in my account that says office hours is over here. And then I'm going to put a video in the PixelCore account, which is about almost 2.5 times bigger than my account, and say, "Hey, office hours is over here." And I did do a little tweet. So letting people know that are kind of in the know that it's there is important to me. Worrying about the raw numbers doesn't mean a lot to me. It's the YouTube page is really currently a service to our members to have a place that it's being recorded so they can watch it. I'm not too concerned about overall views. There'll be some point where that changes, but right now it's doing just fine.
Next question.
Chris Taylor in Carlsbad, California says on the standard office hours webinar link, the audio video is synced, but the feed going to YouTube and back into Mukana is off. How can one encode be good and the other not?
Jesse.
Yeah, well, this is not unique to office hours specifically, but anytime you separate the audio and video into different pathways and manipulate each individually and then send it back into something, there's that potential for one to be out of sync. And basically by adding delay to the audio, you can usually correct that to some extent. But for office hours, maybe one idea would be to send a bleep video for a period of time and kind of look at that offset over time through that pathway. But basically the video processing going on, I'm sure in the office hours pipeline is quite high end and intense, and kind of causes that to arrive at a different time than the audio.
Alex?
I think I was making the assumption that embedded video was going to both of the locations, and obviously that's not the case. So there's something else being done. So the pipelines aren't the same. So we'll figure out why they're not. This is our fourth time out. I don't think there's anything complex. I think that the pipeline somehow, what's going to the webinar is not the same video that's going to YouTube, and we'll get to the bottom of it.
Come back this week where we'll be talking about all of this.
I'm sure it'll be. We'll talk about it Ask Again on Friday. We'll tell you what happened. What happened was that I was being a bit lazy, and it's much easier for me to do the sync test in the webinar because it's real time. I make a move and then I can see it immediately. I don't have to make a move and watch it on the stream. But obviously, I was wrong. I should have been looking at both of them. I was like, oh, they're the same stream to both of those, but I don't think they are. So there's probably extra devices somewhere in there. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
By the way, this is why we're not promoting it too heavily yet, as we kind of tune the little processes.
There it is. Next question.
Next one comes again from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany, and he says, would the next generation of Mac Minis be a good machine for Mac OS Server, and what would be the use case for Mac OS Server in our set of duties?
Jason?
Well, I'm pretty sure that the next generation of Mac Minis are going to be incredibly good at anything that Apple writes. It's important to remember that Mac OS Server is less and less a thing unless you are trying to delegate, a large number of user accounts and very specific, Active Directory things on an enterprise basis, schools, hospitals, you get the idea. It's not really the same as it was. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how we would use it in office hours.
David?
Now it's my media server here, but it's a 2011 Mac Mini with a server running on High Sierra. It's kind of locked in time. It was used at the time for deploying lots of Apple TVs through the enterprise, and that's what its best was best use was. But yeah, like Jason said, it's kind of, the features are not that rich unless you're doing big enterprise-y kind of stuff.
Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York is up next. He says, anyone experiencing YouTube videos pausing by themselves? I've experienced this on 2 different computers lately.
Courtney.
Make sure you're not sitting on the remote. That happens to me all the time. But what it could be, I'm not sure. It may be the local ad server may be pausing your video, especially if this happens, 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 minutes into a longer video. It may be trying to serve you an ad, and the ad server's lost its connection, so it just kind of stalls and pauses. That's the only thing I can figure out. Or, something else can be putting it in pause. Remember, vocal assistants, if you have the Alexas or Siris or Google Homes, they do have control over their various streaming devices. And you can ask it to pause. So if you said something, maybe it pauses.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, so it can pause via the network problem. It can if there's any type of browser issue. If the browser, in some cases, if the browser is not in the primary, if it's in the background, it could do an auto pause. And there is a setting called auto pause. I'm not exactly sure where it is, but I know that it does exist. And you can actually set that and set a timer to it. So if you're not on that active page, and after 5 minutes or something like that, it can actually auto pause from there.
Bill?
And don't forget about all the standard problems of Wi-Fi versus Ethernet and things like that. I keep my this system on Ethernet because I use it every day for this, but everything entertainment-based out there is Wi-Fi, and it just is still going to have anomalies. It's going to freeze. It's going to have little things. Sometimes it needs rebooting. Just stuff.
Next question.
Joaquin Matus, looks like in Imperial Valley, California, says, what do the panelists recommend for an RF transmitter receiver set to wirelessly connect a sideline camera for sporting events? It needs to keep it at the sub $2,000 range. Have used lower end Teradeks and Vaxis in the past, but have not been satisfied.
Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm wondering what your satisfaction level is, because the Teradeks is tough to beat, but if you want to save some money, a Hollyland Mars might do the trick for you, but it's only good for, they say, 1,000 feet. I think you're probably 300 feet might be the limit you want to go with. But I think Alex will have better suggestions than mine.
Alex.
I don't think you can find a better solution under $2,000 than the Teradek. There's definitely better solutions that are longer throw and more expensive, but the Teradeks are probably the best. The big thing that we do to make sure that we do this is we get the transmitter a lot closer to them. So don't try to transmit from where you're shooting the video. We will put, if we're trying to get something from the sideline, we will run a cable to the sideline. We will then take the transmitter and just raise it up over everybody's head. And where somewhere that works that's not close to metal, and have it isolated, and then we're only having to throw 50 feet or 100 feet. If you're trying to throw wireless down the football field, you need a higher end solution, and that's not going to So you want to we try to reduce that distance between transceiver and receiver all the time to the maximum, to the minimum number that we can actually get to.
John.
So a little out of the box, I once used Ubiquiti Air Fiber to backhaul, and then used the Blackmagic fiber to SDI converters on either side, and it worked for me for a couple 100 feet. Pretty low latency. It's essentially rolling your own, so it's results may vary, but if you have good line of sight, that may be an option.
Next question.
Tim Mann in Melbourne, Australia says, what should I be looking for when buying a color chart to use in a school environment with Resolve?
Jason.
In a school environment, with respect to Resolve, the easiest consideration that I could think of is it compatible with Resolve? Resolve has a whole pull-down menu in the color section that are the pure tones that the application processes. Other than that, I would go for durability and dexterity, because depending upon the age of the children, they may or may not be able to be trained to not touch the little panels.
Nigel.
Yeah, I follow on that. I used to have one of these, I still do have one of these small passport ones, and I discovered it was actually too small and quite hard to keep in a good place. And I actually saw Jason using a Spider X1 on a tripod stand. And I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. So why don't we, I got one of those, put it on a tripod stand. I have a fixed lens on my camera and it fills the lens. And that seemed to work a lot better.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I use the Demont chart that I showed earlier most of the time, but when not doing that, I use something like this. This is the the X-Rite color checker. This is the bigger version of that Passport. It'll fill up more of your frame, but I also use the Passport. I keep that in my backpack.
Next question.
Brad Simmons in Alexandria, Virginia is up next. Hello. Can you give us any information on the integration of Zoom and Zoom ISO, which takes the individual Zoom feeds and pulls them into Ecamm or OBS? I see that Zoom bought this recently and wondering what you think.
Okay, Jesse.
Well, the integration is simply put, the Zoom ISO application is built on the Zoom client, and it pulls out isolated Zoom feeds without all the screen debris, as it's been called before, and then you can push those out to NDI, or you can also push those out to full screen video outputs or Blackmagic hardware. And if you're looking into Zoom ISO, you might want to play around with NDI Siphon or Black Siphon, which are free, cool little applications that allow you to route video on Mac computers.
John?
Here's what I'm hoping for. The Zoom Broadcaster Edition has Zoom ISO, has isolated audio, has scopes built in, has meters built in, has guides built in, 4K and 2110 integration.
And that's John's weekly request. David?
I just did an event yesterday, actually, using Zoom ISO for the first time. So I had a Zoom ISO running, joining the same meeting as my production computer was on. I was able to identify the 4 people. This is why I was asking all these questions earlier. I was able to identify the 4 people, bring them in over NDI right into Ecamm. Ecamm just sees them, builds scenes around them. It worked flawlessly. The only challenge continues to be that video audio sync when you're using 2 different computers and getting that all to work. But perfection.
Alex?
Yeah, of course, this show, the new YouTube show, although the video audio sync, as David was talking about, is problematic as we work through that, is all done with Zoom ISO now, and it's the future.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine is here trying to correct my mess up in part. He's actually in Panama, the country, not Panama, Pennsylvania, but I saw Panama, PA, and parsed that wrongly. He says he's noticed the question lower third shows the country flag. I've always had that mix between Pennsylvania and Panama. How can I have the country and the flag show up correctly?
Alex?
We just have to work on it's not done manually, it's done by a machine, and the machine, it just doesn't know the difference between the two. So we'll work on the difference between the country code and the state code.
Next question.
Michael Forrest in London in the UK says, cable management, save me from this hell.
Alex?
I don't think I had my name up.
Okay. Oh, Danny.
Well, it depends on which aspect of cable management. One of the tricks that we found that works is build a giant pegboard and have the pegboard pack the size of at least 2 inches in diameter and 4 inches long, sticking out. Work wonders, especially if you have a lot of long run cables.
David?
For permanent installs, the TechFlex line of products, there's like a webbing you can put a whole batch of cables through and make one big bundle out of them. They also have a kind of like a raceway for carpeted systems, so you can lay them on carpet and it velcros it over, sometimes matching the carpet, sometimes not. And then for impermanent selections, I'm a big fan of the red whips over velcro because they're elastic and work wonders. Get a little cog, and I love them.
Awesome. Well, there we have it. We've gone through the questions for the first hour. If your question got pushed back, go ahead and bring that back tomorrow or later on in the week so that we can address it. And we're heading into social media now.
And we just got the panel discussion question came up a little too late, so everyone's now got a moment to have to put it in there. So we'll work through that. The little starts and stops of things. One of the things that I thought we talk about is a lot of us think about the live stream, and we can be very like we're only thinking about our live stream. What we're not thinking about is how do we accelerate that live stream and how do we use all the social media around it? Just streaming everything to all the different platforms is generally not the most efficient way to do it. And I'll talk a little bit as the panel puts their names in. I'll talk a little bit about how we look at it. We look at like where is the longest dwell time, that's in there for where we're going to put the live stream, and that might be different for every show. In general, as far as a general CDN, largest dwell time will, as far as public CDNs, social media CDNs, YouTube is going to win most of that, where people will stay there the longest, or Twitch. So Twitch oftentimes has very, very long view times because they are watching a game unfold. So Twitch will, but it's only for games. Like we don't see huge dwell times on non-game content on Twitch, but that may shift. I think they're trying to shift that. I just haven't seen it yet. Some of the shortest dwell times are typically in Twitter. Twitter is a very, your dwell times oftentimes are 10, 15 seconds. Like someone looks at it and it has to be really good. So how do we use these? A lot of times what we're thinking about is how do we use Twitter. We might do a short stream before the show. We might have an Instagram during the show, before the show, other things like that. Those Instagram lives, these are other pieces of content. So Twitter and Instagram, oftentimes, because they have extremely short dwell times, we use pre-show to get farther reach to tell people that it's happening, and then we're going to send them to somewhere like YouTube. We find that because the comment tools, as far as a public platform, a non-Mukana platform, that the comment tools in Facebook are probably the easiest to manage, then we tend to use Facebook as the after show. So we tend to, but doing it during the show, the problem is that, again, when you do dwell times, the dwell times are so low and when I say dwell times, I mean average view time, is so low in Facebook. We usually don't want to build up an audience there because they're not watching for very long. So, I mean, we want to build the audience up there so that we can encourage them to watch it on a place that has a longer dwell time. And so those are the things that I know that we think about and talk about a lot when we're thinking about these, is how to use all the different platforms for different things. And the other thing to remember is that you want to use them over weeks. Like if you have a big event, you want to be using these to engage people. Don't tell them that it's happening. Ask them for their questions. Ask them for things. Tell them that, give them little bits and pieces. Every post around the event should provide value to the user, not PR to the user. It should do something that, don't just tell them that you don't want to announce it. You want to engage the audience in every post that builds it up.
Yeah, and just alongside with what Alex is saying is also understanding the culture of those platforms, because oftentimes when we're talking to a client and they want to go everywhere, well, first of all, is your audience even there? Like making sure that you're spending that time to build up, to cultivate, to whether that be throwing out, like Alex said, some Q&A, like polls, like an example of Instagram being very interactive in your stories leading up to it. What kind of content are you rolling out around the speakers? And just all of that engagement is like constantly, one, making sure that it is, like Alex said, valuable, because you don't want to keep repeating the same thing over and over. And if you have a team where, if the client that you're working with, they have a marketing team, yes, they'll probably be the ones that are focused on that piece of it, but taking those materials, splicing them up, repurposing content. A lot of times people want to like, okay, we've got to create new content. Well, depending on how far out your event is, that might not be possible, and just adding more stress to your table. So yeah, if I were just to say some highlights to think about, is like, where's your audience and what do they need, and how can you provide value to them and make it fun, make it interesting. Jeffrey.
So for me, it's about uniqueness, and it's about uniqueness on whatever level. Like for instance, the one thing I hate is when I go into Instagram Reels and see somebody's TikTok, because it's like, if you can't create your own version over on that side, just rinse and repeating it. 99% of the time, I just skip past it because it's the wrong platform. When we go to conferences and we're speaking at conferences, what a lot of conference and social people will do is they'll send us an image with our face on the on the graphic saying, hey, I'm going to be speaking at this conference. Come join me. Maybe there'll be a code that you can get a 15% discount off of and things like that. So having that pre-social planning is always a good thing. It's tough when you're one person trying to do it all. And that's where things like Fiverr and other platforms that can give you a second person to do some of the work will really help out.
Yeah, you make a really good point, Jeffrey, with that of like getting your speakers and panelists engaged and helping to promote and spread the word just even around the event or the conference. Alex?
Yeah, and the hard part with speakers, as a speaker, the hard part that people have is you really have to think about what you're sending the speaker as far as what is content for them to put out. I mean, if I've got, I tend to be very like I'm speaking and then they send me content that I'm not going to post in my feed. Someone who has a lot of followers, and it depends. I'm a minor. I have a minor following, but it's still 40,000 people. And so I think about like someone sends me something that's very markety. I'm not going to put that in. And now I have to figure it out. Like now I have to figure out like how am I going to rewrite that so that it's going to work, and then it doesn't get done, like it's just like, because they sent me something that was horrible, like that was I am not as a person, I'm not going to do that. And when you're dealing with folks that have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, they got that way because they knew how to post things. And so if you send them marketing gobbledygook and then ask them to put it in their feed, they're not going to do that, because that devalues their feed, and they're very conscious to that generally they're very conscious to that process. And so when you're thinking about how to engage a social media person, you really have to think about it from their followers' perspective, not their perspective, not your perspective, but their followers' perspective of what are they going to look at and go, oh, that's a valuable, I want to click on that, and it's not going to feel like this person is just putting something out. And so that's the real challenge, is you want to write those. And sometimes it's just giving them the raw data and letting them type them up. But I've worked with some marketing teams that they've obviously looked at what I write. They've looked at how I write things and they've sent me things that I go, oh, I would have, that's exactly what I would have typed with all the spacing and everything else. And I immediately just cut and paste it and put it in, and then I just prep it out. But I don't want it to ever feel like I'm marketing. I don't want to feel like marketing. I want to tell people that I'm speaking somewhere or that I'm doing something because I think my followers would want to know, that process. I don't want them to feel like it's an ad, because it's, and that's just not what I put in my feed, and so I think that is because that feed should always be a service to those followers. And so I think that people lose sight of that. Marketing teams lose sight of that constantly. Like they think about what they want out of that negotiation and what they want to get the word out, and they're just not packaging it in a way that is that the people get there. So you want to think about that. And again, that's why, for instance, we don't remind people, hey, just a reminder that this conference is coming up. I never do that. Like I'm always like, conference is coming in 2 weeks. We're looking for your questions. Like this is a great one. This is we'll have a short stream that is talking about that. Like here's a preparation for this. We've got other content for you that's free. That's going to let you get to know those things. And so those are the kind of things that I try to think about when we're starting to build those out.
And that key part too of giving you options, like they've presented you, because to your point, that if a speaker, they're probably speaking at other events. So you want to make it easy for them to share that content and for what makes the most sense. Nigel?
Yeah, I would just wanted to add on a thought there that I always think about this, that your social media is a community. Whether you like it or not, it is a community, and you want to have a conversation with that community. So decide what you want your community conversation is. You can't always control it, but try and drive it through a sort of broad conversation you're having. Now, sometimes you'll do that by providing content. Sometimes you'll do that by providing link. But as a marketing person, treat the people you're working with as a community and manage it that way.
Good point. Jason?
To me, social media is a trust contract, and that trust goes two ways. I would rather be original than say something else that somebody else has created, because that's what the people who are paying attention to me are expecting, original content from me. As far as different platforms are concerned, sure, there are different platforms that I will use for different things. For example, Twitter is excellent for syndication, but if I'm going to syndicate it, I'm going to syndicate it originally, even if it's just a quick screenshot from my phone about the thing that I'm posting a link directly to. It's still going through my filter, and that's what the people who are following me expect.
John?
I think you have to decide like what type of content you're creating. Are you looking to build a deep relationship with someone? Are you looking to sell something in a moment? Are you looking to have short interactions like over TikTok that maybe doesn't lead to anything else? It all really drives from what do you expect to get out of this relationship? I think with office hours, what you see is a lot of people wanting to build deep relationships and coming back. And that's really what drives the success of what we're doing here. But there's some times where there's value in like, hey, I just watched the one YouTube video. This guy has the answer to what I want. Maybe I follow him, maybe I don't, but there's value to both types of content.
Good point, Alex.
I think the lasting value is really always going to be building a deeper relationship with you're much better off with 10,000 people that really care about what you're doing than 100,000 that, they kind of are interested in the one thing that you did there. So you always want to think about how you're going to build that, you're always thinking about building that longer relationship. And I talk about this a lot. I always think about everything from a vantage point of hunting, gathering versus farming. So farming is what built civilization, not hunting and gathering. So if you want to build something up, you want to be thinking about how are you planting something now that you're going to get 6 months later or 10 years later, and not how you're going to go out and get berries and find critters that day. That's the thing you want to keep on thinking about is like long term processes and how to build those things up and how to build those relationships. I mean, even when I started before social media, there was mailing lists and I built up mailing lists, 30 years ago for music for Sony. And, we could get people to show up all the time, but we were extremely ruthless about like, if I'm sending you something in the mail, you want to open it. Like I'm sending you something of value every single time that we did it. And so people would send me like 15% off for things. And I'd be like, that doesn't move the needle. I'm not going to put that. I'm not going to send that out. You can't even pay me to do that, to send that out, And so by being really careful about that, you really build that trust, that was talked about earlier with folks. And then the other thing to think about is with social media, and especially now that we're moving toward more and more virtual events, no one remembers anything more than 2 weeks out. Like you can try to talk to them about it. It's like people spread their marketing out way too far. Like we're going to announce it 6 months in advance or 2 months in advance. Unless they have to buy a plane ticket, it doesn't really matter. They're not going to think about it. So what you want to do is spend all that time planning and then spend those 2 weeks or 3 weeks, maybe 3 weeks at the most, but spend the 2 weeks talking about it and doing events. Now, the only place that makes that's not true is if you're going to start building a community around that before that. When people come to me and say, I want to do a big event, I often say, what are the 6 events we're going to do before that? Like little events that are not very expensive. They are like this. They're over Zoom. They cost almost nothing to do. And they're discussions about the topics. And you want to do those for weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years ahead of time, to build up the community that is now you've now flattened the curve. People understand how your platform is going to work. They understand how the process is going to work. They're going to help other people. They're going to be that crowd on the street that's around the person playing music. That's what you want to build up before you try to jumpstart something in a conference.
All right. It looks like we're going to dive into our questions. First question.
Our first one comes from Chris Fenwick on the panel here from Emeryville, California. Has anyone ever been involved in meetings about designing the show hashtag? What should be taken into consideration? Just last night, I was thinking about the hashtags for Preto's rocket launch, and he's got hashtag OH space22 there.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I've done several different things. I've also interviewed one of the people at Sprinkler that we talked about hashtags and what's involved in actually bringing things over. The biggest thing is it's just like looking at a website or anything else. Do the searches first. See what else is out there. And if anything bad comes through, because, this isn't a land grab, anybody can take over a hashtag just like that, just by putting it in and getting an army to take it over from there. I like the fact that OH space 22 has the number at the end. That because once it's done, then it can become OH Space 23 if there's a rocket launch next year, and then it keeps it as limited as possible. But the biggest thing is if you keep it short and sweet, one maybe two words, and then a number at the end that works really well. But then be prepared if somebody decides, oh, we're gonna start to game that and overpower that hashtag with our own message.
David?
I just found a site called checkmyhashtag.com that'll give you some gravity on that. Hashtag space almost is available.
Almost there. Alex?
Yeah, and it is good. I think one thing we see brands sometimes doing is trying to use a whole bunch of hashtags, and then that just diffuses the whole thing. So I do think that one hashtag that you might use can be useful.
Yeah, and I'll just click and jump in there, and just even like minor things, and this just might be myself, is just using capital letters. And because I'm looking at this, it's like, oh, space 22. Granted, we know what it is, but just for the wider audience, just that helps to differentiate words at times. Next question.
Oh, space. Like that. Eduardo Augustines from Panama is back. When performing live streams, would you create multiple live streams for each social media platform or focus on one?
Todd. And he might
Todd's
be frozen.
Yeah,
we'll go to Alex, and Todd can come back because he is our resident musician.
Yeah, I guess are you there, Todd?
I am
Todd's
here.
Todd's back.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, I was like, wait, what is happening? Okay, thanks, Todd.
I'm sorry. It was not an auspicious beginning to the second hour here. Questions. The question was, this is a question that I refer to Alex about. Alex, listening to Alex is something I tend to do a lot, and he really did coach me to say, hey, you might be poaching your audience by trying to do all your audiences at one time. I did it for a long time, and now it's all YouTube for me. I do find that when I am performing and I'm not doing it with our team here, I will often go ahead and restream just to let people know that I'm there. I use restream, and multiply stream to all the platforms. Each platform has its distinct frame and its distinct way of working. Like Twitch, there's just no audience there for me. I wouldn't be able to, I've got 3-4 people to develop audience there. I don't even know what I do. But Facebook has all my audience. So getting them to move to YouTube is kind of tricky. So I these days, I like to play between the lines and do some things that are exclusive, some things that are not. Jonas Dattel, who's not here today, suggested one time, and I'm going to do this at some point, was to put a camera in the back and shoot down and put the video on Facebook without audio, and basically put a graphic that says, hey, come join us on YouTube, which would be the biggest offense to Facebook that would ever happen. And I'd probably be banned forever. But it was an interesting thing to think about.
A lot of people do that on Instagram and tell their Twitch followers to follow them there, and these are DJs specifically, just from a music perspective. So that would be interesting. You're gonna have to report back when you actually do that, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it's not so much that it has to be YouTube or anything else. It's just that I find that what I'm worried about is interactivity. How am I going to interact with the audience? How am I going to answer their questions? And as you start to go across lots of platforms, what happens is, unless you have a lot of people in each one of those platforms, unless you're getting hundreds of people or thousands of people on each platform, you've now taken a bunch of rooms, that have, a small number of people in each room, and it feels like an empty room for them, and so by getting them all to go to one place, you end up with a room that has more energy of all of them kind of interacting with each other. So that's part of the reason we do that. The other issue is that, again, if you're building up a lot of people watching on something that has very short dwell times, you're just not building that overall connection. So what we see in YouTube, and we look at it, I mean, in Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, we're looking at average view times all the time. And if we see low average view times, I don't want to build up a relationship with people that are leaving every 10 seconds, and so I want to build something up. If I want to see it to be 6 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, the average view time for office hours, for instance, is 72 minutes. So it's a lot, or 78 minutes. Sorry, so it is a long dwell time because of the interactivity that we have with folks, and so I think that when we split it up, we just end up with a lot of people that don't feel as connected. They don't realize how big they are because they're spread out in all these different rooms there. We still stream to all of those platforms. Well, when I'm working with clients, I haven't had the energy to do it here, but we still oftentimes stream to those, but we have pre-shows and post-shows and all kinds of other things that are going on in the different platforms. So that's different, distinct content that we think is fundamentally more built for that platform than necessarily the full show.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, so when I have my 24/7 live stream going, I go to basically 3 channels. One is YouTube, the other one's Twitch, and the third one is Twitter. Twitter is usually just to let everybody know that the live stream started, because it just disappears as quick as it shows up. But for the other 2, those are the long-term settings, and if I get people that come onto Twitch every now and then and have a good conversation, and then if they just want to watch, especially on like a TV or something like that, that's where YouTube really shines from there. I will stream to Facebook and LinkedIn and those socials only if I have content that's live, like me demonstrating something or something like that, rather than the 24/7 content like my 3D prints. Mostly because things like Facebook have 8-hour cap, 8-hour cap to it, and they'll just turn off automatically. But more to the point, just as Alex said, they'll be passing by just as quick as they show up, and I want to give them a minute. And to answer Todd's question, doing the camera behind with a link going somewhere else can be against the terms of service of some of these platforms. So just make sure that you have that understanding of what the terms of service are, and if they say don't do it, or else you do lose your channel.
John?
Yeah, I think to Alex's point, a crowd draws a crowd, right? So if you see a bunch of people watching and hanging out for a long time, you're going to be more inclined to stick around and listen and find out more about what is driving these people to engage on this platform. When I started off live streaming, I was throw it everywhere. And what I realized is you think that there's engagement or some sort of discoverability. What you really find out is that where you invest is where you're going to reap your returns. There's not great discoverability on Twitch, YouTube. Facebook is, your friends and family, so maybe people watch, but it all depends on what type of content you put out, if they really, care to engage in it. So where you build your community is where you should be, staking your ground.
Next question.
Next one comes from you, Liberty White, Atlanta, Georgia. How often are you responsible for social media for the events that you stream and or produce?
So I kind of asked this question in part 2 because I'm just gauging questions coming in for today's show and just wondering if it's a matter of like most of our panelists and our producers, are you coming in as just the team that does the execution and someone else is doing the social media, and or are you also required to do that? So I just wanted to put some context around it. I will also answer it by saying more times than not, we're coming in and we're doing the execution. If it's a nonprofit, they often bring us in early enough to ask us, our thoughts around it, and can we support? Because we do both as a video marketing, that keyword there. But I was just curious for everyone else and the producers who we could also use some more of your questions as well. Alex?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm just executing, although usually I'm in the conversations and giving 2 cents about what we think will work based on our experience. So it's kind of like there's some influence, but usually I'm not accountable for it, which has been a great position to be in the last 10 years because I got to work with a lot of ad agencies. So you get, we've worked probably over 100 different agencies. And so you see different approaches to it. And we've gotten the opportunity to learn a lot in that sense. And so usually we say, well, we think that based on our experience, that works or doesn't work in a live stream, but we usually are not the ones accountable for that process.
Got it. Todd?
Since I'm a solo performer, my partner Isabel and myself, we're totally responsible for it, and we've been wanting for years to be able to hire somebody just like you, Liberty, to counsel us and help us do our social media. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention is that one of the hardest things about streaming and about social media interaction is the lack of numbers available to really be able to see the specific measurable result of your efforts. And I'm hoping that comes up today in our conversation, just so I can kind of learn more about how to really specifically notice what has impact and what doesn't.
Perfect opportunity to throw a question in the chat there, Jeffrey.
For me, it really depends on what hat I'm wearing. Like, for instance, if I'm running Geekazine, I don't have anybody else but me taking care of things. So if I don't put it up on social media, it's just not going to go up. I have another business we call Build Day Live, where we go out and we install enterprise appliances into a server and show all the setups and stuff like that. For that, we have somebody that actually does the social media for that, which is really nice. And of course, for office hours, technically my social media part is that I make sure that the YouTube is up and running, and we've got the events set up for each week now as 2.0 starts to come on from there. But the biggest thing is I'm going to be doing a show that in the next month here, where I'm going to be working on the social media on the back end. So after the live stream is just going to be convenience for people to watch when it's live, but it's going to be about the show afterwards, because it's going to be not only something you can watch as a whole, but it can be cut up into bites, where bites can then be thrown up on Facebook, and that's perfect for a Facebook, so people can watch the 1 to 2 minute clips and then go to YouTube to watch the whole show and go from there.
That's an important point that you put there too, of just like the post after the live stream. There's still engagement opportunities on social. Next question. Oh, whoops, Alex can jump in there.
All I was going to say is that when you said that, the thing you want to think about of your live events is really that your live event is a tent pole, and basically it creates urgency. So it pulls up and it creates, okay, there's something happening at a specific time, but there's all this opportunity here to engage. So before and after, to Liberty's point, that there's tons of opportunities to engage your audience and use that tentpole. But the urgency of live creates energy, and I think a lot of people miss that when they don't do a lot of live streams. They don't realize that there's an urgency to what they're doing that just doesn't occur when it's just a forum or just a social post.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine's back from Panama. He says, will we have a full second hour or an education day with social media?
We are now.
Ooh, right. Alex.
We're doing the second hour right now. So if you have questions about this, I mean, this is a general, like, how to use social media around live streaming, but feel free to ask any questions around social media. We still have 30 minutes and only 6 questions. So you can throw things in if you have specific questions about social media. And we're going to do more on Mondays where we bring people in from different agencies. And so this is just kind of a startup conversation.
Yeah. So yes, this is our opportunity to ask, what do you want to hear and know about social media, so we can bring those folks in. Next question.
John Snyder comes up next from Reno, Nevada. He says, what are some suggested pre and post show engagements you'd like to do that build engagement and keep the event top of mind for your audience beyond just the day of the event?
Jason.
If I have keynote speakers, for example, I will ask them for a demo reel. I will ask them for, prior things that are cut together already. Sometimes I will even cut them together myself, and I will run them 2 days out, 1 day out, 3 days out for, at the time of the event. That I find to be pretty useful. Also, if you're running some sort of best of, if you have enough commentary and enough prior stuff. For example, I've been for the last 15 years on an internet radio network. We will run best of automation. We do not rerun whole shows, but if you're doing 2 hours of live radio, if you don't have, 2, 3, 5 minutes of something decent to add to this automation clip, then you probably shouldn't be on the air. So to that end, it ends up becoming this cycle that gets better and better and more engaging over time.
Alex?
I'm going to keep always coming back to build a community. Like, look at how you're going to build a community, a consistent community over time, not how to get people to come to your event. Like that, that is the getting people to come to your event becomes automatic when there's a community to do it with. And so figuring out how to, at this point, we're talking about a 365 solution, not a, 2-week solution. 2 weeks is good to kind of get people to know, but you really want to be thinking the future of these events is building communities that events occur inside of, not, doing an event and hoping people show up. But in the sense of those events, when you get 2 weeks out, you want to be thinking about extra little posts. Did you ever think about this? Did you know this? Did you things that people might catch people's eye? And then you also want to engage them so that you could have multiple discussions that are happening before that event. We see event companies all the time. They want to keep all their good content in the conference. And so they don't want to put anything out here before it because people might not show up. Well, I mean, they might not show up because they don't know what's going to be there. And so having that there, and it also means that if you're doing it on the same platform that you're doing the event, all these people have now registered. They've all figured out how to do it. They know how to ask questions. They know how to do it. That's the chaos that occurs on these events, is you suddenly have 3,000 people showing up that have never used this platform, that don't understand how it works, and they're frustrated. People frustrated in a live environment is not great for your event.
Right. And then even just, as we keep saying, talking about community, think of like a family reunion. And so you go, you get to meet people or reconnect with people. And sometimes you don't get to see everyone. So if your event is like that family reunion, and then afterwards, it's like, here are the photos. And that's why thinking with the end in mind is why you need to be able to capture some of that content. What are the photos that Jason kind of mentioned, like the top 3 things, getting people's feedback. People love to see themselves, especially when they're investing money to participate in the event. So just some of those types of content pieces are always helpful. And then that's while we're talking about social media, but then that ties into your email marketing campaign and what you do after the event, because for you, you're serving your audience, but then also you're collecting this data so that you can QA and hopefully your events continue to improve as you go along. I'll let John jump in.
Thank you, Liberty. I just want to remind everybody that the post engagement, your post engagement is 10 to 15x your viewership than a live performance. So that's important. And it's hard to find media anywhere else except for YouTube. So keep that in mind.
Next question.
David Brady in New York City here on the panel says, what are the recommended pre-roll times when live streaming? I've hit a few events with no countdown timers that simply roll a static graphic, maybe with music, and I usually bail unless I am really interested.
Alex?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things that you can do as a pre-show, and the worst one is a still. So a still is kind of death to your viewership, and so you want to be very, very careful about stills that say starting soon or coming up or whatever. People just leave. I mean, the attrition rate it's eye-popping. Like it's 80% of your audience will be gone by the time you start your show. The reason for that, but you do want to think about being at least 5 minutes out, because the way that most of the notification systems work is they take 3 to 5 minutes to get to the entire following of whatever you've targeted. So if you're doing that, it just they don't all get told right when you go live. So you don't want to go live really, really fast, because now you're going to be warming up your audience. And so 3 to 5 minutes should be the minimum. Now we put up a countdown clock here just because that's the most efficient way to do it. The best thing to do is a pre-show. So the absolutely best thing to do is to start a pre-show 15, 20 minutes ahead of time and be actually talking and interacting with the audience and warming them up. This is the same thing that would happen if you went to David Letterman or if you went to something else. We're warming up the audience. We're keeping them there. We're getting them excited. We're talking about things that are coming up. And that is the most effective way to have the maximum amount of impact, as you go into it. And the better the pre-show is, the pre-show should be treated as part of the content. So it's part of the content that's somewhat disposable, meaning people can kind of come in over time. The second best is to throw up content. So just put up great content. That might be the older content that you've had. That might be new content that's prepping them for the show. So they're watching some videos and you have a little countdown clock. You want to constantly be telling them when is the real show going to start, so they have consistency there. The third best is what we're using right now, which is a countdown clock. But you hear a little of our voice below it, so it's a little bit of a pre-show as well. But as a countdown, the countdown clock becomes something that tells people that it's going on. And then the worst is the starting soon slide. So if you're going to do a starting soon slide, then I would make it less than 30 seconds. Like just put it up and then make sure that it's live and then go, because it's a fairly worthless thing to have in front of your show. Hope you can't hear you, Liberty.
My apologies. Yeah, people have just been conditioned now. It's like an ad now. Okay, are they really starting soon or not? So, Jeffrey?
Yeah, if there's not a face on it, I don't like countdown clocks at all. And so this is what I do. And especially because I'm on Amazon Live, and I do Amazon Live streaming from there. And there are also some specific rules. And this also falls in LinkedIn's thing. If you go over a video for 5 minutes, you have they have the ability to cut you off. So especially on Amazon Live, if they know that you're running a video, it's been over 5 minutes, they'll cut you. Simple as that. With countdown clocks, I want them to see the behind the scenes action. So when I do something like that, I go to Restream. And then I'll start up on YouTube because that's the easiest thing to do. And I'll do like 10, 15 minutes ahead in some of those cases. And then I'll start talking. They'll see me do all the preparation as I'll go through the screens and all my graphics and stuff like that. I don't go on Amazon until about 2 minutes before, once again, because I don't want to get cut off before I even start. But I'm always there. There's always at least the talking head or the empty chair if I have to go grab something or something like that. And then, of course, the countdown being on the corner with other information like a hashtag, like a follow me here or whatever like that. And then you can give the interactivity, always looking at the chat. If somebody comes in and says, hey, I got a question really quick, I can try and answer it before the show starts. But at least you know that I'm there and I'm ready to go.
Alex?
Yeah, and one thing that you want to think about that we're not doing very well yet with office hours, but we will over time, is if you have a countdown clock, go to black right before you start your show. The reason is it makes it a lot easier for you to cut out of it. So, you can trim your YouTube, trim your YouTube or Facebook or whatever. You can trim that, but just do a blank to black and then up. And that fade to black and then out means you have a hard place to cut. So that makes it a lot easier. And we haven't been doing that yet for office hours, but we will. So because it makes the whole thing a lot easier coming out of the countdown clocks.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana says, is embedding streams with other tools better than integrating them separately? I like to bring up tweets live on stream. Like bringing tweets live up on stream. Everybody loves seeing their name, but what is that a more effective engagement strategy?
Alex.
Yeah, a lot of times when we're working through these things, so grabbing things that people say and putting them on tickers is really popular, and it works. It's definitely, people are looking for that. Obviously, the thing that I believe in is that engagement with the audience and answering their questions is the most important thing that you can do most of the time, is being able to constantly come back and be part of that. And that might be them posting things on, one of the things we like to do a lot is like if you have Instagram, you get people to go take pictures and put them on Instagram and hashtag it, and then you're pulling those photos up. And finding ways that they can submit part of the content is really great. We've done ones where we engage people to go, if you want to ask a question over video, just take your phone out and take it, and we'll promote that for weeks ahead of the show so that we have time to look at them and pick the best ones and post them out and so on and so forth. So those are other ways that you can use those other platforms to get content from your followers.
Next question.
Ranjan Shandil in Los Angeles says, are there social media hashtags that most people may not know about but should follow?
Jason?
I always think of this in precisely the opposite way. I think of social media hashtags as a trademark or a service mark, something that is unique and specific and almost by its very nature ephemeral to a specific event. I don't think of them as chapters or long-running topics that would require some sort of long-term, I want to be following this.
This is a great question. And I'm thinking about it in two ways. One, if it's more so like when I'm using hashtags, I think I've mentioned before, of just like industry specific, like when looking for editors or looking for other social media folks. So I'm following industry specific because that also helps to just keep me up to breast, especially on platforms like Instagram and like Twitter. When it comes to the event wise, and since we're live streaming and social media wise, is like, okay, what other event hashtags might there be that could maybe compete with the event that we're, if we're working on an event, or even when the client comes to us with a hashtag, we're doing additional research just in case. Sometimes there are banned hashtags that people aren't even aware about. So just coming back to your question, am constantly following industry ones or on behalf of our client, what industry they're in, to just see the lay of the land. So I look at hashtags more so research first, and then also branding opportunities, as Jason mentioned. Next question.
Jeremy White in Virginia here in the U.S. says, I'd like to hear the panel's thoughts on social media platform selection, specifically for a house of worship, but also in general. Are there better community management options on some?
Great question. David.
Well, I'm not sure about the community management, excuse me, but when we got into streaming for the house of worship that I participate in, I threw hardware at the solution. I had an encoder that had 2 engines, so it was hitting Facebook and YouTube simultaneously. We then advanced to the Mevo camera when I took my gear back, and then recently picked up an Atem and switched everything over to Restream. Our Sangha is a little bit older, so not everybody's as tech savvy. So the people that want to watch on a big TV will usually hit YouTube. The people that want to watch on their tablets will hit Facebook, and it addresses those issues pretty well.
John?
We use a platform called church.online, and that integrates with our membership services. And so then you can leverage that to, people can put in different requests for prayer. There's private messaging that can be included there. And it's a great way. It's easy to integrate into our existing website. So anybody who's going there. In addition, we also stream out to Facebook. That's where we do most of our engagement. That's where we're going to get most of the views, but we're also monitoring that other page just kind of for any sort of private messages that may happen throughout a service.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, use something like what John said, but plus Boxcast is another one for House of Worships. But the bigger thing is when it comes to something like a House of Worship, I would make sure that I have a really good crack team on the comments, because if somebody comes in and starts throwing hate, for example, then they can squelch that as quick as possible. So if you don't have that team, you might want to build one up and make sure that nobody's going to try and game the system, especially when you're trying to get a specific word out.
Alex?
Yeah, we're seeing some of the most advanced house of worship are now starting to treat their sermon as a separate event. So they're not trying to stream the sermon. So they're already, larger churches are already doing it 2 or 3 times on Sunday. They might have 2 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, or just 2 in the morning. And they're saying the same thing again. And what they've realized is the best thing to do is to go into a smaller space that's closer to the online audience, and then give the same talk again, where you have great audio, great video, great interaction, and then be able to stop at the end and have a conversation with the audience about the questions that come up and what they're doing. Again, the interactivity put at the end of the event changes the way people listen to the event. When they know that they're going to have questions that can be answered later, they switch to active listening as opposed to passive listening oftentimes. And so the thing is but by creating a separate event that is designed specifically for the online audience, and the reason that they're doing that is because many of them are seeing their online audience be 10, 20, even 30 times bigger than their in-room audience. And they're starting to realize that they have to cater to that much, much larger audience specifically, and not make it something that's just another thing that we're doing from the main session.
Next question.
Lois Richter in Davis, California, up next with what keystrokes would cause all Chrome videos to stop? They started when I didn't want them to.
Alex?
I just raised my hand to say I tried to make this work, and I don't know. I don't know what that keystroke is. Since no one else raised their hand, I just went up there. I was like, I don't know how to do that. All right.
Todd?
Command Q.
Well, that'll stop it, yeah.
Sometimes it's just that easy. Lois, let us know in the comments if that's what you were, if that's what you were looking for. Command Q. Next question.
Jesse Mills in San Francisco Bay Area said Facebook Live does not seem to have a live Q&A tool where participants can ask a question. Seems that you have to find questions in the comments. They do seem to allow 1080 video now, so maybe they're leaning a little more into HQ streaming.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem for Facebook and YouTube and everyone else, is that the questions aren't separated. The first thing you learn about doing question management is if you don't put chat in, people will chat in the questions, and if you don't put questions in, people will ask if you only have chat, people will put the questions into the chat. And so the separation of those two is the key to the operation. So you're absolutely right. And this is why people get into low latency. Now, the reason that we have another tool that's the sister tool to Mukana is called Commenda, and what it does is it goes into Facebook and just rips all the comments out of the event and sticks them into something that looks a lot like Mukana, and so then we can manage all of those comments and questions carefully. And as soon as we do that, then sanity returns to us, but for other people, it's still like this kind of chaos that's there. But finding something that's going to strip those comments out, and StreamYard does that as well. There's other people that can strip social media comments out, but that's what you want to do so that you can start to sort them, because trying to do it from the raw stream is difficult.
John?
I'll cover the 1080p aspect of it. It looks like that they are allowing it, but it's only for creators who have a specific over number of followers, as well as looks like it's aimed towards their gaming platform and not towards their typical stream. So it may not apply for what they're looking for.
David?
Yeah, I kind of misread this. There are facilities to post questions as the producer of the event out to the audience, but not the reverse. So I'll yield my time at that.
Chris?
Alex, I'm curious about, I get your comment about if you only have one place to interact with the audience, there's going to be comments and there's going to be questions. Pulling out the questions is a nightmare. That's why you invented Mukana. At what point is it rude to say, please post your questions if you don't actually get to all of them? Like, if you can pull some of them out to let the bulk of the audience know that, oh, look, they're answering questions. But at what point is it a problem if a few people are sitting there going, you never got to my question?
Well, I mean, and that's why you put voting in. So that people, because what that means is that every question represents theoretically a lot more people than just the person who asked it. I mean, that's what you're trying to do there. And then oftentimes you just tell people when you do high frequency events are something that for us usually means that there's more than 100 interactions a minute. So there's just, we're not in a high frequency event, and we've done ones where the frequencies have been up to over 150,000 a minute. So it's just like, and it just churns up. And at that point you can barely see it. It's literally just going like this and just changing all the, and so at that point, what you're doing is, you're just telling everybody, hey, put your questions in. We're going to get to as many as we can. That's what you do, because that's the reality. Now, with specific verticals, so things like product launches, what we've done with earlier versions of Mukana is we'll put a whole team in the back end. So we'll put up to 10 people in the back end with a traffic manager, and the questions are coming in. Now we again always separate the questions from the comments. The questions are all coming in, and what we do is the traffic manager routes them to the show or to one of the experts, and they know who the experts are. So it might be the developers, it might be the whatever. This one goes to Frank, this one goes to Susie, and they literally, it's super high stress to be that traffic manager. And so sometimes we've added traffic managers. So there's like 4 of them. We load balance all the questions against those like 4 or 5 people, and they're sitting there going like this and just pushing all the questions. And the people who are answering the questions only see the ones that apply to them. They don't have to see the big stream of questions coming through. And then only a couple of them, a certain number of them are going to the main show. And one of the outlets for that, by the way, is comments like, hey, this is great in Oklahoma. Love you in London. Like all that. They're just pushing those all down to a ticker that's coming out the bottom end. And what that ends up with is that people are being heard. They're answering the questions via text. So in the center channel, what you see in Mukana in our desktop version, that just fills up with all these answers that are just going, coming down. And we're answering, we can answer about 250 questions an hour that way. And what that means is that, right now, because we're very fast in office hours, because in most shows that I work on, we get 12 to 15 answers an hour. In office hours, we run between 25 and 30 because we're just disciplined about how we answer the questions and so on and so forth. And so, so we're doing really well, but this is at a whole different level. It's 10 times faster. And people love those because they walk away with all their answers. And they're oftentimes those answers that are coming from those engineers are the best, so it's good.
The reason I ask is I'm teetering on whether or not we want to open up for John's launch, the rocket launch, whether or not we want to do Q&A. don't want the show to be a lot of Q&A. I want to engage the audience a little bit. So I'm okay if we don't get to all of them. And I'm trying to debate whether or not I want to, bother you to see about potentially using Mukana, but I think it's overkill
I don't think so. I mean, it depends on who your hosts are, but I mean, I think that you want to, and you're more than welcome, obviously, to use Mukana. So if you guys contact me, that's fine. And so but I would use it because I think that what keeps people to get in this is the Q&A. To me, content just sets up the questions. Like it's just like because that's what keeps people active. That's how they stay awake. When they're watching something, and when you can keep people watching what you're doing when you're spending $75, $200, $300,000 a minute. That's what you're watching on Netflix and everything else. You can keep people's attention. If you're spending less than that, interactivity that's the secret sauce to get people to keep watching without spending enormous amounts of money on the production. And you guys are doing an enormous amount of effort on the production, but you're definitely not going to have Apple TV Plus or a Netflix level production, because that would be really expensive. And so anyway, we don't have $1 million.
John's pulling out all the stops. He's sold his house to do this thing.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is that so the secret sauce, the way to kind of short circuit I don't have a lot of money is interactivity. Is taking in the questions and interacting with people and having them feel like they're part of that. And that interactivity can be different things. It could be like one of the things I was thinking about with Todd is that like if you don't have if you don't have enough people if you're not doing more than 1,000 people or 500 people, you may want to think about Zoom. That's what Daria did concerts for people on Hangouts for years, and Zoom is gonna, you may do it, and that wasn't doable before 1080p, before high quality audio, before those things. But now you could have an audience that is, that you can see, that they can see you. I mean, that's, that it's a different world now because Zoom is turning all those quality dials up. That might be something that you think about as well.
Next question.
Next one comes from Todd Reynolds in North Adams, Massachusetts. I know how to read YouTube analytics, but are there equivalent measures available for Instagram and Facebook that are more detailed?
There are. So you have Facebook has Insights, Facebook, and also, Meta owns both. And there's also Insights for Instagram. And Instagram, I find that they're just more picturesque and easier to read just for how they have the breakdown. And and there are a lot of YouTube videos out there that help in explaining your insights, but then there are also other tools like third-party tools that you can use that again make it much more user-friendly, and that you can gauge things like Sprout Social or Hootsuite or Planoly that just help from, again, the overall social. But it's definitely worth it to just sit down and learn some of those steps. And I might come into after hours one of these days and just do a 101. So that might be helpful too. Jason?
Wow. First, Todd, if you know how to read YouTube analytics, consider me impressed, because to me, it is a constantly moving thing. I'm thinking, wow, well done. I think I know how to read it. What I need, I've figured out over the years how to get what I need from whatever it is they've done to it this month. But yeah, it's always kind of a touch and go thing.
Alex?
I mean, I think that there's things that we wish we had more of in YouTube analytics. I actually like them a fair bit because I can tell a lot from what I'm looking at because I've watched it a lot. So, what you're looking for, of course, is, when you're looking at YouTube analytics, you're looking at a slow buildup, from not very many people to a lot, means that your marketing at the beginning wasn't very good. So it's, so you didn't find a way to hard start the system. And so that's just a marketing problem. That's not a stream problem. Things that are a slow downward from the start to the finish is a bad stream. Not a bad stream, but just not a compelling stream. These people are slowly walking out. What in a perfect world, you see basically, you want to see it go, you want to see it go up like this, and then go like this, and then go like that. like that. That means your marketing was good. You kept people in, and then as soon as you left, they were like they were off. This means that they were active. When it goes up to like this and then goes like this, that means they weren't really watching. Like there's a whole bunch of people that have left their browser somewhere in the background and they're not paying attention. When you're just showing black or the thank you for watching and it stays and it goes like this, that tells you that it's on, but they're not there, because they didn't go somewhere else. And so we look at all of these things, as we start to go there. But yeah, as I said before, like this. That looks great, except that means that you didn't get the word out here. It meant that people were doing it. Now, the other thing you want to do is keep track of when you do tweets during the event, because what you'll see, or when somebody has a tweet, and that's why hashtags become useful, because if you see this and then you see whoop like that, and then it goes like that, that's somebody who tweeted something happened, there when that happened. The other thing you want to see is if you see this, that you want to go back to the video and see, what did you say? Like, what did someone say? A whole bunch of people just left. Like they just were like, no, like that's not, I'm bored. When it dropped, when you have a cliff like that, that's you said something that or not you, Chad, but the person streaming said something that offended people. So there's a lot of data in those things that we pay a lot of attention to, because you can really get a sense of your show. Of when those tweets, because when you're working with a team, I have to build reports on those. Like I have to go back and say, okay, this is when you put the tweet out, and was it effective? And if it, like for instance, if you see this and then it goes back down like that, that's a tweet. This is a tweet by someone popular that doesn't line up, that you didn't line up with their audience. Because everyone came and looked at it and said no. And they left, and so that's why if you see this and then it goes like that, that means the tweet accelerated an ingest and then it went through anyway. So we can talk about that probably for a second hour.
Chris,
I'll let it go.
Interesting about the graph shapes. Just recently we did a live thing for a realtor, and I was sort of monitoring the thing, and I just very simply was texting the people in responsible, and like every 15 minutes I'd say, this is your viewer count, it's going up. And at the end of the show I did exactly what you did. I left the stream up for an extra 10 minutes, and about 20% of the audience were still on like 5 or 10 minutes later. So it was what you had said. Somebody just left their browser on and left the room to go make dinner or whatever. It was an interesting stat to keep track of.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine's back from Panama. What are your thoughts on streaming on Instagram? Is it as effective as doing it in YouTube or other long form platforms?
Todd.
I'm just going to share my thoughts on it because that's what you asked. I think Alex might have something more profound to say. I have found it to be, I don't enjoy watching it, and I don't enjoy streaming to it. I try to do it from my studio, which is against their terms of service to start out with, so I'll cop to that. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't actually save your video, and it doesn't allow you to see your comments. Some people hold their phone and watch comments and then do it into their camera separately. I don't know. I haven't found it to be a very rich experience at all, and I'm looking forward to hearing what anybody else has to say.
Alex?
I think, people use it because they're told by their agency to use it, and they use it because it's easy for them to turn on, and there's not a lot of pressure, and they can just, the non-record is kind of an ephemeral thing. I found that, like when I was using Meerkat early on, is that I would stream things that I would never stream normally because I knew it would be gone. I just knew that it's going to be there for a moment and then it's going to be gone. But what I will say is the quality is really frustrating. So I think for short-term things like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, it might make sense, or 5 minutes. For a long-term thing that you intend to be meaningful, I don't think that it's a very good platform. But I think Twitter and Instagram is what we use often as pre-show, like basically disposable content that gets you excited about what we're about to do.
And just to jump on the tail end, so the question being like, how effective is it compared to YouTube? Remember, YouTube is a search engine, so your ability to for people to find your content, they're looking for those keywords and all of that. That's YouTube. Instagram is that place where it is, if you're showing something and you're demonstrating, and it's just like that fun.
I'm trying to cross pollinate, so I'm trying to have my Facebook folks come to YouTube go to Facebook, like I'm trying, when we're working with folks, the only one that tends to be distinct is LinkedIn. So people tend not to cross pollinate LinkedIn with their social media. Most people, they want, because that's an entirely different audience, it's their professional audience and everything else. So a lot of us won't try to cross because what we say and how we interact with the other social media tends to be very different than LinkedIn for the most people that I know. That it's much more focused on business and career and those types of things than it is on some of the more fun stuff that we might do on other platforms.
Next question.
Next one comes to us back from Eduardo Augustine in Panama. He says, what type of content would be a good digestible content through Instagram Live?
So when you say digestible, I'm thinking you're talking about like under 15, 20 minutes, possibly. I will say that Instagram, the benefit of it is that it's notifying your audience. So you don't necessarily want to just have quick, short content unless it is and I'm going off of like the influencer side of things of like, oh, get ready with me, or like those kind of things where people really want to see what you have to say. But then, yes, the kind of content is like either if it's teaching, I've seen reports because now on Instagram, you're able to bring up to 4 people like yourself and 3 other people. So you can do things like having talks or cooking. I see cooking work really well on Instagram. So yeah, so things that are engaging where you're showing people or like really thought leadership, or you have a special guest on, those kind of content pieces work well. David?
Digestible? I thought the term that you coined, Liberty, was snackable.
Snackable content, yes.
That's all I got on that. Yep, just a quick little nibble. Yep.
Sorry, yes, snackable, but that's usually short content. So, but on an Instagram Live, you don't want to just pop on and pop off because you have not given the algorithm or the platform long enough to like reach out and let your audience know that you're there. So you definitely want to hit over like 15, 20 minutes, if not longer. Jeffrey?
And please, 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 put your camera, put your phone on a tripod. Invest in one of these. If you have to go portable, these things are great. They'll stabilize your video tenfold, and especially if you're showing something and you go, look at this over, it's horrible. And it put your best foot forward on any type of social network, and that's a great way to do it, is just invest in something that'll stabilize your video.
And that's a great note to end on. Thank you to all of our producers for your questions, and for our panelists for coming back each and every day to answer all of these questions. And now we're going to get ready to hop into After Hours. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.